without any ado, everybody knows David Steffan. Dave Steffan's had a lot to do with spring fire, the recovery from the fire, and we'll let you go ahead and speak. Thank you.
So, I imagine that most of you are probably familiar with a lot of the specifics of the spring fire. It happened on June 27th of 2018. The lead up to it was one where we were just all kind of holding our breath. For years, my mom, our place up on Middle Creek, she kept the temperature recordings, and rarely had we seen over 93, 94 up there at 8,200 feet. The day before the fire, we saw 103 degrees, about 8% relative humidity. So it was just one of those that was really, it was just looming, and we were just kind of all holding our breaths down here. And the result, after about 7 or 8 weeks before it was finally completely contained, 108,000 acres, 216 homes, 119 other structures, but the ecological damage was much, much worse, and that just doesn't even illustrate what the entire big picture as far as loss of natural resources and just ecological damage was. So my involvement, it really began. It really began when I joined the State Forest Service, started learning about mitigation, and probably actually started further back than that when I just became really interested in forestry and just ecology and the environment and the way things all work together in a system. But I started in 2016 as the crew boss for the Wildland Mitigation Service up in Cachera. When we were going around, we had several grants. The main one was an emergent FEMA grant where we were doing work around mainly cabins, doing defensible space work. We did a little bit more landscape style work on some of the common grounds up there at the Panadero Homeowners Association and other places where we could really take out a big chunk. Then of course, during the summer of the fire, I've been working at the museum, and on that day, looked out just as we were about to close the museum, saw a big plume of smoke going up, and went, oh no. So then, pretty busy for about a month, fighting the fire, assisting people and getting back in. And at the beginning, it was just getting people out of the way of the fire. That's all we could really do. And so since then, I've had been on several different, they started a board, which was a kind of a mutual aid board to keep everybody that was affected, all of the organizations that were involved in the fire recovery, kind of up to date, make them aware of what everybody was doing, which is very important in a large scale incident like this, because you want to kind of correlate efforts, and so that efforts are they're working at enhancing and complementing other efforts on the fire. So that's been almost 5 years. It's been 5 years that I've been doing that in various aspects and for various companies. Started out with ARWIC, which is the Arkansas River Watershed Collaborative. Had a lot of involvement with them, first with hand cleaning. Also, I was crew supervisor for them. I've done quite a bit of grant work for both the Warfield County Water Conservation District and for SPOP, which is the Spanish Peaks Alliance for Wildfire Protection, which was the fiscal agent for a BLM grant, the BLM grant was doing adjacent lands that were below the fire, doing what we could there, and then in a lot of cases just helping my friends and neighbors, just coping with a lot of the after effects of the fire. So to the book, it was very interesting. Missy asked me to do this because she knew that I would probably have something to speak about as far as resiliency, and that's kind of one of the main themes of the book. So I was like, I've done the Two Peaks one book before, and it was interesting. It was like, I usually don't read fiction, and then so I was like, I'll take it home, and I looked at it, and I was like, Shelley Reed, It's like, I know who she is. So she was my freshman English professor at Western State, and had a great time with her. She was, obviously very, very much on getting everyone up to a college writing level. So freshman English was good, and then we had a class called Core 100, which was, it was a choice of professors, and they, but it was one of these kind of, humanities type classes that everybody had to take these certain core classes, but it was nice because they let you select your professors, and Shelley was really interesting to me because not only was she really about social issues, she was also really big into natural resource issues and was very much about the environment and that sort of thing, and she ended up becoming one of the founders of the environmental and sustainability major at Western, so created a whole new major there. So, and of course, a lot of my work study projects at Western had to do with ecology. I did some on fire ecology with the Gunnison sage grouse and how fires, high intensity fires or no fires were affecting the Gunnison sage grouse, and I could make that a whole talk. It's very interesting. So it had a lot of very interesting classes and experiences. Of course, it was very interesting to have her, and so I thought it was great to get to read this book with all of you. So the theme of always finding a way to go forward, we were kind of faced with that after the fire. We could have just thrown our hands up and said, it's all messed up, and but being stubborn country people, we decided to work together to educate ourselves and just try to get experience from those that have already been through it. And so that was a very important aspect of that, I think. So as I go through this, like I say, I've been doing this for 5 years now, and so some of the terms I use, I might not be familiar to the layperson, so if I say something, just feel free to say, Dave, what does that mean? What do you say? You keep saying that word. What is that word? But I'd like to kind of start with some of the overall terms and kind of some of the disciplines. And it was really interesting to me that through this fire, there's so many different disciplines that came out of sedimentology, biology, ecology, just a lot of different things that all work together, and you have to kind of observe how those different disciplines work together. But the first is hydraulics, and after the fire, that was the big one. So that's the science that deals with the practical application, as in the transmission of energy or the effects of flow of water. So suddenly we had great deals of water coming down all at once, and that goes into hydrology. And so hydrology is the science dealing with the properties, distribution, and circulation of water on and below the Earth's surface. So why do we care about that? Well, that brings us to hydrophobicity, so hydrophobic soils. So the fire, especially the fire burning so intently, caused a sheen over a lot of the soils, a crust that was not permeable by water. And we saw a lot of that, and one of the things was that we had a lot of duff, which is pine needles, and so pine needles are full of sap and resin, and it almost lacquers the soil, for lack of a better description. So so that was one of the things that we were addressed with. One of my neighbors, he really put a really simplification of it, but I liked it. He's just like, it was as if we just covered the whole area with a sheet of black plastic. So that's not a very scientific way to say it, but I think people really understood what we were faced with. So then sedimentology, that's the study of dealing with sedimentary rock and the inclusions and how sedimentary rock is built up. And it was very interesting after the fire. It was like things were suddenly moving in geologic time, just huge amounts of rock, different layers of sediment, a lot of water, so the hydrology being high pushes lots of big rock, and smaller flows, little rock, and so we would see alluvial areas, which alluvium is rock that's moved by floods, versus colluvium, which just rolls down. But a lot of alluvium, we're seeing centuries worth of alluvium in these floods where all of this stuff was washing down. And of course, because it's built up so quickly, it's very unstable. And so it has a propensity to be able to be moved again. So fire ecology, I mentioned that. That is a complex living system in which fires are not suppressed by humans. So that is the natural system, ideally with natural fire return intervals, and so that's another term that I'll probably talk about is natural fire return intervals. And in a lot of those cases in a good fire ecology, you have low intensity fires that clean out the litter on the bottom, take out some of the smaller trees, but they burn in a mosaic pattern. So they leave some trees, they take others, and of course it's always returning a lot of the nutrients to the system as it does that. So that fire ecology, and we've upended fire ecology in the last 120 some years because of fire exclusion. So we are just so our ancestors saw fire as a waste, and so the idea came about that we wanted to be on the fire quickly, get it out, and not lose resources. And it became really pronounced during World War II because there was because of the war effort, there was a lot of efforts to save natural resources and put it towards the war effort, and it just kind of became this ingrained thing that fire is bad, just all fire is bad, so we got to put it out immediately. So then going on to the restorative process, so that's the challenge, and that's where a lot of these kind of wide-flung sciences come together into what we're going to do with the restorative process. And one of the big problems, of course, was burn intensity. And because we'd excluded fire for so long, we had just mass amounts of dead trees. We had a lot of diseased trees or trees that just weren't healthy because of overstocking in the forest. So you have so many trees competing for that water, and you have a lot of different age groups of trees too. So you have smaller trees that are on the surface that are trying to suck the water, keeping it from the deeper rooted trees. We had a lot of that duff, like I said, it had not been burned off, and water would fall on it and not penetrate into the water table. It would just evaporate off and would not even be really utilized by the trees. Something Manuel talked about at the talk over here, when was that, in September, August? About the recovery? October, yeah. So if you have anything to add about any of this too, please feel free to jump on in. Is the seed bank, and so the seed bank is just what it means, just what it sounds like. It's a collection of seeds that are in the soil. A lot of them are just waiting for the right conditions, and one of them was there's several of them, but I'll probably get to it later on. Because I have a lot of other very interesting things to talk about. Another one is plants that have serotinous cones. So the main one that we're dealing with up here is the lodgepole. And serotinous, basically like Triceratops, it's like a horn. It's like a hard shell, and so the cones are sealed up tight. They're just waiting for fire. They can sit on the branch for decades waiting for fire. And so the lodgepole pine is a very fire adapted tree in that regard. And after the fire happened, all of these opened up, and we saw that was the first conifer to come back, and it came back like it looked like a golf course the first year. And then of course as they grow, there's kind of a principle of stand dominance, which the trees that are doing a little bit better, they might have a little more root under them, they have a little bit more height to them, those will take off, and the others will fade out and not survive, but the healthy ones will. And that's why you get lodgepole stands that are all a very uniform size and age, because they're started by an event like a fire, and then of course they all grow up together versus other types of trees like ponderosas and things like that might be a stand of mixed ages. The other one that's a big one and was really helpful is clonal species, and the big one's aspen. We know that the largest organism in the world is out in Utah. It's the Pando clone, which is like an 80-acre stand of aspen, all genetically the same because it's a clone. And so in areas where we had aspens, those came back pretty quickly. And because aspens, typically the aspen is very resistant to fire. The problem that we had up there, that a lot of times the white firs like to come up underneath the aspens, because the white firs, the babies like the shade, and so it's like a community that replaces another community. And where a lot of our aspens were, they had white firs that were 8-10 feet tall and just really thick coming up underneath them. And of course, they burned really intensely. But in firefighting over on the western slope in college, I'd see places where fire would burn right up to an aspen stand and just stop dead. And the reason for that is, one thing, they don't have a lot of branches. You know, the canopy's up high, so it's really hard for a ground fire to become a crown fire in that case. And then of course they have a very tight bark, so that, you know, it's not something that can catch sparks, and the wind will stoke it into the bark. So the clonal species they've come back pretty well. We've got aspens, and I'll show you pictures that are probably 12 feet tall now that are coming back. But the other thing is that, and also the oak and the locust, same thing, that they didn't have the high intensity either, because where the big old conifers like the white firs, Doug firs were burning, there was such intensity there that there was, you know, the soil was really baked underneath those types of trees. And a lot of the aspens, you know, that root network, in fact, when there's a healthy stand, they emit a pheromone or hormone that actually suppresses any roots from sprouting up. As soon as the upper canopy dies, suddenly all that hormone is no longer being suppressed, and they start shooting up all kinds of roots. And we were having aspens come out up in roads that had been there for 50 years because of the roots, so they started sprouting up. So then another thing that we saw a lot of, which was in addition to the seed bank and obviously the bigger trees, was wind-carried seeds. And the problem with that really was that a lot of it was like invasives, you know, things like Canada thistle. We saw a lot of goosefoot, wild lettuce. You know, when you have a denuded landscape that's hydrophobic, you're almost like, you know, any port in a storm. You know, thank you, but don't stay. You know, we want to get better things in after you. So some of the other plants, the osha was one that came back. Corydalis, which is a little kind of clumpy flower that's got various all over the world. It's got different variants, but here it's a gray flower that's got little yellow blossoms. The Ceonanthus velutitis, and that's one that Manuel showed me, is one, and it's called the snowbush is the common name. And this is one that I'd seen as a child way up on the ridge, and it finally made sense to me. I only knew one place that it lived, and it was because it was a lightning strike fire that was not that old. So these seeds remained in the seed bank waiting for another fire, and so after the fire,
we were impressed on our property, and in 100 acres, we knew of 2 specimens of Ceonanthus velutinis. And we combed that place, you know, being biologists.
Sure.
We only found those 2.
Yep.
Now it's carpets of them.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep.
And we started wondering, what could how long have these seeds been in the seed bank?
Yeah.
And it turns out that the minimum time that they can be in the seed bank and sprout, and they need a really severe fire to score the seed coat
Okay.
to sprout, 600 years.
I had no idea.
So the plants are patient.
Yeah. At the same time, I'm not surprised. And
Yeah.
Ron, you know, it's our fire chief here today. We were talking about the last really big fire. What was it? 1837. 36. That there was a landscape-wide fire up here that was a really kind of something that would get to that point where it would be so bad that it would release those seeds and have, you know, stands, which would in turn put their seeds into the seed bank.
The one other thing I'd add is that just a few weeks after the fire swept our place, you did the mitigation and other folks, and so we, through this 20 acres of mitigated landscape, the fire shifted from a crown fire to a ground fire.
Forced it, yeah.
Went through. Lots of standing, living ponderosas, and the Clark's nutcrackers came in, harvesting seeds and caching them. So there's an animal caching
component to it too. Yeah. Yeah, and that's really interesting, and talking about especially the ponderosas and the way that they're naturally spaced out, that they will survive a fire, and I'll show you some pictures of up on Middle Creek where they were able to. But another thing that was very interesting after the fire was they have what they call a stress crop, being that the tree is like, I've got so much energy, I've been partially burned, but I'm just going to put out seeds, and we saw it with the white firs mainly up our way, that they were putting out massive amounts of cones trying to reproduce. And there were places, the ponderosas like I mentioned, but there were places that were low-lying areas. And if you look at the burn scar, you can see every now and then there'll be a stand of trees that missed it for, the fire missed for some reason or another. And that's really, really good, because the way the fire looked, it was like, well, there's going to be nothing left. And there were places that we had like 100% mortality just because of the burn intensity. But there were those little, oases of trees that made it. So, with that, I think, a couple other things I'd like to talk about. One was, it was something that we ended up calling unintentional innovation. And it was, they were helicopter seeding on a private ranch up here, and there had inadvertently gotten turnip seeds into the mix. And they started seeing these plants, and we actually saw them on Middle Creek, because they actually had washed down, and in places where the stream had come up and just deposited a bunch of really black ashy mud, we saw this strange plant, and soon we saw turnips that were almost the size of cantaloupes. And so, but it was mainly up on the Saddlehorn Ranch where they were actually seeding from a helicopter, and these were mixed in. And so it was really interesting because they did really well in high burn intensity areas. It was also, so with the big giant root, it was breaking up the hydrophobic soil, and then of course the elk and the bears and things were rooting after it, so they were mechanically breaking up the hydrophobic soil too. So that got me thinking, and when the Decker fire happened and I was doing some work up at the Decker fire by Salida, I was thinking, well, I want to try like icicle radishes, turnips, beets, whatever, and just see if they could work on opening up that soil. But unfortunately, the soil type up there wasn't appropriate, because being at the foot of the Sangres, it's almost all like glacial till, so it's just like hard, like granite rock that's just been torn up by the glaciers. And the area was mostly, pinyon juniper was the forest type, the kind of the conifers that grew there. So, but that was really interesting, that's always a thing to look for, is unintentional innovation. So if something's accidental but it works, you can definitely go with it. So I'm going to move over to the treatments, and we'll roll through the pictures after I kind of just do a fairly brief talk about the treatments that I was involved in. Actually, this first picture, the very first fall after the fire, this is it, and this is up on our place up on Middle Creek, where we'd seen a couple of small floods the fall after the fire, and up to that point they were mainly just really ashy, and they were actually the ones that the brook trout had survived in the creek. But then the ash came down. We were actually following the very first flood of this black ash as it came down the creek, and it was just churning and just terrible, and all this charcoal and everything. And the fish were actually jumping out of the creek to get away from it. But so good news, bad news. It killed the brookies, which are an invasive, and 2 years later they were able to bring back the greenback cutthroat into that basin. So that's been very interesting, to see how that's kind of played out. But for the very beginning, our very first efforts up there, this is really before we had much government involvement or anything, was just to try to do these basins that would slow the water. It would catch some of the water and some of the sediment, but we would try to kind of meter out how much water was going down. And I'm almost embarrassed by this, because I learned so much more during the course of the further treatments and everything, and started getting people that had already been through it. But that was the first efforts up there. So, and of course that was just kind of private efforts. Other than barriers like this, we were just felling single trees in the bottom of gulches. Just all those branches would cause the water to kind of eddy and drop out anything that they, any sediment that they were carrying at that point. I started doing seeding by ridge running that fall, which as soon as the first major snows happened, up on like the Tower Mountain and all the way over pretty much to the San Isabel border, I take 2 big buckets or bags of seed, and I just walk a ridge and just throw seed down both sides. And so pretty early in after the fire, NRCS came up with 2 mixes of 7 native grass seeds each. One was for above 7,600 in elevation, one was for below. So, but a lot of those seeds were really good because a lot of them, just the properties of the grass, like clumpy grasses that really, slow the flow of water down, and to get up high on the watershed was very important. So that was into the winter, the first winter, so 2018. So the next year I was hired by the Arkansas River Watershed Collaborative to kind of collaborate with groups that were on the ground, just kind of to coordinate a lot of efforts with each other, and like I mentioned, to do adjacent projects that would benefit each other. And so that's kind of been something I've tried to do over the years. But our very first program then was, we got an AmeriCorps crew in, and we started with channel clearing right over here on Middle Creek. So the Cacheras had pretty much been done by the local groups here. So our kind of goal was to start at the edge of town and work up into the burn scar, up Middle Creek, Indian Creek, a little bit up Abeta Creek. But then, and then once we got into the burn scar, we moved into actual structures that would stop things coming down. One of those that we did up there was LEBs. So those are log erosion barriers. They're contoured logs that are keyed in, buried in, as absolutely level as you can get them. So they act like a baffle to the water, and you would do like 3 here and then 2 here where the openings were, and then you do 3 here. So kind of made a serpentine pattern for the water. But one of the great things about the log erosion barriers, and I have illustrations of it, that they caught a lot of the ash and that sort of thing early on. But and of course they slow down the water, but then as the logs, they're in contact with the ground, and so they almost immediately start melting or start rotting, composting, and then they did what they call a lob and scatter with the branches. So the branches aren't on a tree, or a tree that's, the branches are holding the log up and it's going to be there forever. They're actually in contact with the ground, and so they are starting to not only hold the ground, but they're also starting to compost because they're in contact with the ground. And so as we moved up into the burn scar, this is when Gib here came and worked with me to help me, because I was running, by this time I was running 2 crews. So I had a prison crew of hard-eyed convicts, that, and then I had a bunch of pretty teenage girls, and so never the 2 like me. So Gib was helping me keep. Occasionally, one time I had to walk one crew past the other, and they're like, woo! Not the teenage girls, the convicts. Woo! So anyway, but anyway, very interesting people to work with, both of them. So the other thing that we did a lot in that phase, once we got up onto the burn scar, was wattles. And so wattles are a cylindrical tube of straw that's in a mesh, and those were really interesting, and they're pretty lightweight, so you can get them way up on slopes, and then you just stake them down, and you try to run the contour with them to slow down. And again, that was one that we caught a lot of. We were doing that seeding with the native grass mixes above those types of things. So the summer of 2019, again, we started bringing in heavy equipment to some extent, but still there was a lot of stream channel clearing, and actually my convict crew started doing a lot of chipping with woody materials that were down in the stream bed, and especially in Middle Creek Canyon, where there just wasn't anywhere to put them, easily. So, and some of that chipping, we actually use that for mulch higher up in the basin. So I have them, clean the channel, chip, and then I take it up to the AmeriCorps kids, and after they'd seed, then they'd throw down the chips as mulch, and that was a really pretty effective treatment. So that fall, we actually had aerial seeding, and it was not, originally they were hoping to do it on a much larger scale, but because of certain grants and certain requirements with the U.S. Forest Service, didn't want to do it without also doing the mulch, but it would have been great, but it would have been prohibitively expensive. And if you remember, for a while there was massive amounts of brush out here at the airport. They were going to get like a tub grinder and grind that, and then we were going to do that in conjunction with the aerial seeding, and that aerial seeding never happened just because it was just, too expensive, really. But the aerial seeding that they did it with a small single-engine aircraft, and they did it for private lands, and I was pretty impressed with it. They did it in October, right after the first good snow. Ideally, our number for a square foot was about 50 seeds per square foot, and we had about 24. So coming from an airplane, I thought that was pretty effective. That was like half of optimal. So the next summer, we started moving up Indian Creek. There was stream work. The Methodists, we called it the Corps, the United Methodist Corps, which was kind of it's a volunteer corps that came down a lot from the Denver area, helped with a lot of the stream channel cleanup up there. We had some places where we were doing heavy equipment work right up almost to the Forest Service boundary. Big problem there is Raspberry Mountain is huge, and it burned extremely intensely, and it was catching a lot of those storms that were coming in. There's these super steep couloirs that go up. Then there's Indian Creek, and then there's Tracy Canyon. They all come down to a canyon that is literally like between this building and that building. And so that is still, well, I guess they've done a little bit of restoration work there, but it was very difficult to do anything there just because the amount of the hydrology was just kicking it down every time anybody, we tried to keep up with it, and we just couldn't. But the efforts then was to keep the road up to Sulphur Springs in good condition. And really, my thoughts there was to keep the stream in the stream channel. And what we'd seen on Middle Creek especially was a lot of the woody debris, because the trees like the stream, so they're right along the stream. The woody debris was damming the stream. Suddenly it was up on the road. The road was the path of least resistance. Oh, and then there's a freshly dug fiber optic cable in the road, and so it gets into that, and before long you don't have a road, you have a giant chasm, and the former creek bed is up here full of rocks and logs way above what's now the creek bed, and that is what happened up there right at the bottom of Price Canyon on Indian Creek. So the effort there, and by this time I had a new AmeriCorps crew, and we had some delay because of the pandemic. So this is in summer of 2020. We were having them work from Sulphur Springs down, and we were cleaning a lot of any potential woody debris that would be swept away along the stream and opening up the stream channel as much as possible. At that time we were just doing burn piles, small burn piles, but we were leaving kind of a screen along the road of if you pull on a log or something and you couldn't get it out, or a branch or something, if it was embedded, we'd actually leave it. So it was actually acting as a screen, so when the water came up, it would keep it from entering the road. And then also had a lot of cooperation with the County Road and Bridge, which put in a big water bar every 200 yards or so. So basically, wherever it was a high spot, they put a big lump in the road, which would kick the water back into the creek. And so we were able to save that, and I think that was a big win. Then that fall, we did a lot of work over on Pass Creek. You'll remember Pass Creek, the road got blown out several different times. One was a problem that off of that hogback, that hogback's bad without a fire because there's so much rock on it. And it just completely blew the county road out. So we did some structures up above it. We did structures below it too, to keep it from what they call head cutting. So the water will plunge off the road, but then it'll start just scouring, and it'll just start backing up. And so a head cut will come back into the road and just destroy the road. So we did quite a few road protection structures over there all the way until about Christmas. And then our last effort for the winter of 21 was at Up Top. So at Up Top, they'd actually had logging done, mechanical logging that had pretty much cleared the whole area. And so what we did is waited. We called it frost seeding, and we waited until there was about 3 or 4 feet of snow. We got a tracked side-by-side with a seed spreader on the back, and we actually ended up buying a bunch of conifer seeds just to kind of get into that seed bank at that time. And as we went around up there spreading both fertilizer and the native grass seed mix, I'd look, and being a kid, you know, I got to spend a lot of time up in that area, and used to go over to the old ski area where they had the old truck that would take you up the slope, and I'd be like, oh, I remember there were limber pines here, and I'd throw a handful of limber pine seeds. It's like, okay, we're definitely in Ponderosa country, so I'd throw some Ponderosa in. And it was actually a lot of fun there too, because there were places where the fire had just come up to stands of lodgepole, but because Up Top was a high value cultural area, there was a lot of retardant drops in the area, and so there was quite a few lodgepoles that, you know, benefited from this. But I took the serotinous cones off, put them in a Dutch oven on my stove, and popped the seeds out, and took them back up and seeded them. So that was pretty. It was pretty interesting. And so the next spring, like I mentioned, the greenback cutthroat trout were stocked up there, and this is pretty interesting because in, I think it was 2016, the Hayden Pass fire up down the river from Salida, they'd actually, the Parks and Wildlife had gone in through the fire line, captured, I think it was 54 individuals of this distinct Arkansas basin cutthroat trout, and then had propagated them in fish hatcheries. And so from this 54 original individuals that year, by the spring of 22, there were hundreds of thousands of them. And so that was when they did the first stocking up there on Middle Creek, but they did a lot of testing. The big testing was to see if the pH of the water was right, also the temperature, and one of the things that happens after a fire is your water temperature in your creek is too high for trout. And so once they saw that those things were good, also that the water insects were coming back, so they had a good food supply. So they surveyed for all of that, and then they've done a couple of different surveys since then, and a couple more subsequent stockings with different ages of fish. So they've done like fingerlings, they've done like 4 to 6 inches, and they've done like 8 inches. So so far so good. We had, I believe it was the summer of 22, we had one little flood surge that came through, and it actually rose the creek. It stranded a few individual trout outside, but the overall population of the trout did okay. So then that summer of 21, Idlewild, and this is a really large, as far as the amount of water, the stream carries a lot of water. It's not a very big basin. It goes up to this mountain that we call Tower Mountain that's dead west of town. It has a communications tower on it. A lot of that mountain is shaped like a wedge, and the side that goes into Castilla County is the flat side. And so way late into the spring, sometimes even into the summer, you see huge snowbanks up there on that ridge. And so that was one that had a lot of water, and it was really steep, and it was really blowing out. So we had heavy equipment come in and do cross veins, which were basically log structures in the creek to hold back things. And then Juniper Valley, which is the firefighting crew out of Canyon City, came in, and it was a fairly hectic. It wasn't the worst fire season, so it was kind of bad for me, because every time I get them in and get them lined out and they start doing something, they get called off on a fire, and they might be gone 2 weeks, or sometimes they'd be back 2 days later, you know. But usually if they commit to taking them somewhere, they'd be gone for a while. So I didn't have those guys as much as I wanted to, and what they were doing is contour felling. So contour felling is just taking the burnt trees, felling them flat across the hillside, so that they act as basically, kind of the same principle as the log erosion barriers. And again, taking the limbs off and doing the lob and scatter to get that in contact with the ground. And I was up there in December and saw that we've had good results from that too. So this final spring, SPOP and BLM had that, I alluded to that earlier, a kind of a sediment capture grant that was for lands below BLM, and just the way the area was settled around here, a lot of the lands that became public lands were up where people just didn't settle, and so that was the thing with a lot of the private land in the Spring Creek fire, was that BLM was perched up above and was shedding water and debris and that sort of thing down onto private land. So in that one we did sediment capture, so we did on what they call ephemeral draws. So ephemeral draws are draws that only part-time of the year, or some years they don't even run water. So we did some structures of those ephemeral draws to capture the small sediment. So one of the things that initially we were worried about with the trout in the creek up there was the water. There was plenty of water going through the creek, but there was this coarse sand building up in the creek, and it just didn't have a place to be. And so we started by capturing that. And right now what I'm working on is a project at the mouth of the Middle Creek Canyon, so where it comes out of the really big red rock up there, and it's kind of a multi-pronged thing. That's where the string gauge for Levita is. That's the warning gauge, and they've opted to keep that going for at least another year. So we're working on trying to clean that up. We're still doing some more grass seeding up on the slopes, but that's an area too of talking about. You try to get different projects to complement each other. So that was the effort there, to protect those basically the integrity of the stream channel below. If you can keep that coarse sand and that sort of thing up in those ephemeral draws, then you don't have to deal with it in the stream system. And so that's probably, I don't want to jinx myself by any means, but that is probably going to be the end of my my efforts with the recovery for the spring fire. So that all said, any questions at this point? And if anybody needs to leave, I won't be offended. So if you only allow yourself, yes, ma'am.
I kind of learned somewhere, is it still a rule about where if you have a fire that's started by lightning or by God, that you
The
don't
let it
fight
burn,
them?
the let it burn rule.
Yeah, is that,
Well, a lot of times that's the U.S. Forest Service. That's kind of been their policy.
oh,
Ron, do you know exactly how that works?
It depends on what area it is.
oh,
Like the Spanish Peaks area, where it's wilderness area, it's an act of God fire area. So it's determined at the time. We had 3 fires up there on it last summer. 2 of them nobody ever went to.
mhm.
And they let them creep around and do their thing. So it's a case by case deal.
Okay.
So, and what Dave said earlier, biggest mistake we ever did was listen to Smokey the Bear too much
Right.
and put out little fires, and then we end up with mega fires. When CK, Maury, and I started fighting fire, 1,000-acre fire was a big fire.
Mhm.
Anymore, 1,000-acre fire, that's just an afternoon little party.
Yeah.
So that's what no fire has done, and my goal here is to get people, every time you see smoke light up on the forest, it's not a bad thing. Sometimes it's best if we let it burn out a little pocket, so down the road, it's already been burned, so we might be able to stop a bigger fire in that pocket.
A dumb question, I don't even know what started the Spring Creek, was it?
It was
heat?
human. It was human caused. It was a
It
guy that
was.
was either ignoring
Oh,
or
that's right.
didn't
that
know.
man.
Yeah,
Okay,
and it was
okay.
over on the. I can't remember if it was on Wagon Creek or if it was on San Gabriel Crystal Ranch.
Just on the south side of Wagon Creek, in San Gabriel Crystal.
Okay, so it was over
Okay.
close, about 5 miles this side of Fort Garland.
On a road called Spring Road.
Yes, Spring Road, yeah. So, okay, before I go through the pictures, because they might get a little bit long, I just wanted to kind of touch on some of our important elements of resilience that I think I've learned from, and it was very interesting, when I was reading the announcement in the paper talking about how we are recovering from the fire, kind of separate from the ecology. And, something for us in this town, people thought, oh, well, the fire was there, it was bad, it was dramatic, everybody, lots of people had to evacuate, and yeah, that was really bad. But then we had the ongoing, just day after day, worrying about floods coming, wiping things out here in town, efforts that we made up there getting destroyed, road and access and that sort of thing getting destroyed, and just even the life safety of it, because a lot of roads up there, we had some very bad runoffs up on Big Branch right by the Gap, well-traveled highway, so it was just kind of like this ongoing trauma, and it was like something that I noticed that was a very interesting weather phenomenon, that after the fire, because of all that blackened land and the way the heat was reflecting up from that, almost every day at 1 o'clock, my little beep 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 would go off with a weather warning from NOAA. I pull up the map of the entire state, and you could almost see in dark red the outline of the Spring Creek fire. It's kind of like a big X, because of all that hot air that was causing columnar rising up, which then of course brings all that water up, starts forming thunderheads, thunderstorms, brings that water right back down. So it was like very ironic. It was like just what we didn't need. And then another really interesting bit of the weather phenomenon, same sort of thing, because of the columnar rising, was the terrible hail we had. The fire, I don't even think, was completely out, and we had a terrible hailstorm here in Lomita, and anybody that was here for that remembers that. And it started out just as, when I observed it, it looked like little marbles, or maybe peas to marbles, and they were coming straight down. Then suddenly these like egg oblong shaped hail started coming from an angle from the northwest, or from the north, mainly from the north. And so almost all the damage that at my house over here in Virginia, every window that faced north got broken out, because the worst ones were coming in at an angle. And I don't know exactly how to explain that. There must have been some circular motion or something up there, but that column lifted them way up, and then as they came down, they were catching all that rest, that cold air was collapsing in that column and causing all that huge hail to happen. So that was very interesting. But back to my point was that it was an ongoing thing for all of us, and so I think that I think the town just working together, keeping each other informed. I think that was a very big thing about that points to the resilience of the people. So I wanted to kind of address that, as well as the resilience of the burn scar. Some of the things that I thought about was to learn from failure and adapt quickly. So if it's like the definition of insanity. You don't keep doing the same thing and expecting different results. You learn. You try not to have regrets about it, and you adapt quickly. So wholeheartedly accepting your circumstances and not wasting time on denial. So I think that was a big one, and it was kind of hard, because a lot of times we put a lot of efforts in and then they were just destroyed. Another one I thought was a good one was having both patience and persistence. And that might sound like those are like mutually exclusive, like being a pessimistic optimist. But the thing is, because a lot of times people think of persistence as being, kind of overbearing and stubborn and that sort of thing. But to combine the two of both, being patient, but also being persistent, and doing the right things. So, and then, as far as some of the practices and examples in the book, a lot of people were very excited to immediately go out and start planting Doug firs and just all kinds of trees that they wanted trees back again as soon as they possibly could. And what I would allude to in the book was when Tori moved to Paonia and moved all the trees to Paonia the first couple of seasons, she was instructed to pull all the blossoms off the trees so that the roots could get their strength and not spend all their energy on the blossoms. And so for our example, kind of the analogy here would be that the first couple of years we had to secure that soil, start with the grasses, let the grasses do their thing, let those clonal trees like the aspens and the oaks come up and start forming their clumps, also getting those leaves back in, the leaf litter and that sort of thing onto the slopes. And then, especially with the fir trees, once those aspens get up, and like I mentioned, the aspens now are 10, 12 feet tall, and so last fall, I took white fir seeds and just spread them out under the aspens, so that now they can come up under the aspens and where they're going to want to be. So just kind of adapting to that, and then also kind of alluding to the book is of going like a river, is to find the flow of nature and just go with the flow. To not get in a hurry and fight it, because you're just going to be running yourself down. So that's really what I had there. Anyone have comments, or we can go through the pictures and look at some of the treatments? But I'm almost to an hour, so if anyone needs to go, but I'll open it up for questions right now, and then we can look at the slides. Yeah, good.
Question I've always had, if all the efforts, Smoky Bear and everything, hadn't been in practice for the last 100 years, how would a natural fire and a natural forest, for instance, work? I guess thing I struggle with sometimes is you see, and you referred to it as a stand. I mean, a ponderosa sets its seeds. You don't get, hundreds of small trees coming up. What did you say? More the dominant one will eventually take over.
Like stand dominance.
Right. So how would a fire react if they are getting, regular fires, not clearing everything out, I guess, in those clonal stands and that? How would some of those survive then?
Well, like I was saying, in low intensity fire, you get mosaics. So you'll have islands that the fire will work its way around, a lot of times due to slope, so it'll go up the steeper areas, or if it's a weather-driven fire, wind-driven fire, if it's downsloping, so it adds an element of variability to it. When you have mega fires, everything is fuel, the fire sees nothing but fuel, and in this fire, it was just tremendous. I mean, everything from the duff on the ground to the biggest trees, everything was just on fire, and it really flew in the face of conventional fire behavior because of all that super heated fire front was coming down. And like I mentioned, the humidity was extremely low, the moisture in the trees was extremely low, and so I saw things that were just blew my mind. Growing up with forestry and thinking about, if a fire comes, it's going to be fuel driven, it's going to come up the hill, go up into the fuel and crown out and go up the ridge, or it's going to be a wind-driven fire that's going to come down with the prevailing winds. And instead, what I see coming from the Castilla County line is this wall of fire just barreling downhill and just basically gasifying trees in front of it. So, so that's the thing. If we don't have that huge fuel buildup, the fires will do like the mosaic patterns. So.
Okay.
Okay, if there's nobody else, we'll look at slides. So I explained this one already. Want to go ahead, Tony? So, like I was mentioning, our first efforts were to get up and bring in that native grass seed, and so the next year, that was kind of what things were looking like. It was very important because to preserve that mat of roots, and that was something that where the water was coming off the ridges, and something that they say that I think is very, very telling, and I think it was in last month's Smithsonian, they were talking about, I think it was up in Idaho or Montana, about trying to rehab a lot of the old logging roads up there, because what I learned early on, that when I look at the sediment that comes off of fires, like 80% of it comes from roads. And now that I think about it, I'm not really that surprised, because you don't have root structure to protect the roads. A lot of times the roads, like happened up here, the roads are the path of least resistance, that the stream channel becomes clogged with debris, it takes the roads and just blows out the roads. So another thing that we saw, once the bottoms of the gulches, once the rocks that were rolling down cut through that root mat, it was just like a chainsaw that just went down until it got to bedrock. And so we saw a lot of material of various sizes coming out like that. And in the canyon, it was really interesting because I could see, after it blew itself down to bedrock, I could see that bedrock had been sculpted previously by water. And so I started thinking about, well, when did this happen? And I started looking at the cut banks, the straight up banks, and looking, it's almost like tree rings. It's almost like the dendrochronology, but you're reading the sedimentology and seeing the events that happen. And so what I surmise is that when all the ice from the last ice age washed out and melted, it went all the way down to the bedrock because of the volume of water coming. And then for the last 10, 12,000 years, the spring runoffs have just been building that back up. And so we know, this was a just massive, massive wildfire. And something else that was really interesting, in looking at some of these banks, I found 4 distinct burn lines. And a project I'm working with the Colorado Geologic Survey, first we did carbon-14 dating. And it's not extremely accurate because of what they call the old wood theory. So you can only, the wood that you're reading might be 200 years old, just because it was in an old tree. In Lansall Meadows, where the Viking settlements were, they were looking at wood that may have been in a ship, got over, built into a house, so it could be centuries off. But something that they were doing, and I've got some pictures, we did it back just over a year ago in the winter. We went up there and took OSL samples, that's optically stimulated luminescence, and this almost sounds like science fiction, but you find a rock that has been in the dark, you collect it without getting light on it, then you shoot special wavelengths of light in it. The way it reacts, it can tell you when the last time it saw sunlight was, which is just amazing. And actually, I use that over in Israel in the archaeological dig that I do over in Israel too, to date things that are haven't seen the light for a long time. So that's really interesting. And also, I've been working with the fire management officer for the San Carlos district. He's been doing burn rings of trees that have seen burns, and a lot of these old ponderosas. And not only can you tell when by counting back with the dendrochronology of when it happened, you can see which way the tree came, the fire was coming from, because it'll burn around and the flames will go around, and when they get in that lee side, they'll actually set the tree on fire, and you get what they call a cat face, which is just a kind of a cutout, almost a burned out part of the tree. And so it's really interesting, and that's one of the things I'm really interested in seeing is what the fire return interval was and what the return interval for really big fires was. And that we had them, but then there were a lot of smaller fires that just happened on a 5 to 10 year fire return interval. So go ahead, Tony. So there's my dog. She's very happy that the ash is gone and that she's actually getting something resembling grass and pasture type land back. Go ahead. This is unfortunately it's pretty much an alluvial fan. So when water is coming out of a gulch and really moving, it moves a mass amount of rock, and it's when it gets to an area where that's what they call degrading. So when it's cutting down, it's degrading. When it gets to an area where it doesn't have grade to disperse and keep it moving, it starts aggrading. And this is pretty much like an alluvial fan. So what will happen was it'll shoot out one way until it gets too high, and then it'll shoot out over here, and then it gets too high and it'll shoot out over here, and you get this fan of rock that will come out of a very, very small gulch. And some of these I was looking at, they're like 4 feet wide, and said, how did all this rock? It's like a bunch of ants coming out of one hole. They just keep coming, and they just all deposit in just one area. And it's very, very hard to deal with, especially in this case with the original stream channel being down below. And so this is one of the things, like I said, it was a very small area. You can do these crib walls, and what you're doing is trying to keep it from eroding, incising they call it, all the way down to that bedrock. And at first we had the benefit of the old, stream banks. We had this, and in a lot of cases we ended up losing it just because the sheer volume of the water. But some of our earliest structures were things like that to help the water drop in a controlled manner. A lot of times we put bigger boulders down here in what they call the scour pool to keep it from cutting further and further down. Go ahead. So this is This is just I think this might be pre-fire of a park up there, but one of the things that you can see here, these being, ponderosas, and these ponderosas are still there. Like I say, they're very fire adapted because they grow, they don't crowd like a lot of the mixed conifers, and obviously lodgepoles and things like that do. So, like I was mentioning, one of the things about that, those hot air currents rising off the burn scar, and that's Raspberry Mountain, which is a huge, huge mountain, extremely steep, a lot of surface area, and this was, I think this was the July 21st fire in 2020, and it just opened up, and of course that narrow spot just above Silver Springs, took all that water, so huge amounts of water. But that was a lot of times we were seeing just above the burn scar, it was just generating its own destructive thunderstorms. Let's go ahead. Again, here's one of these gulches and just all of the rock that was just let out pretty much, and a lot of those, the alluvium that had piled up for centuries, once it started cutting through it, it just left, it just lost its stability. Go ahead. Another one just kind of shows you the size that it was starting to move once it was getting down below those roots that kind of held the surface together. And then again, starting to insize. Like I said, it would get to the point where it's going to try to go down until it finds bedrock, and then also the problem too is that it starts to try to widen out. This is one of the things that I had the prisoners do. We knew that there was weather coming, and so we were doing these sill logs, and you can see here that in the event, it captured all of this material that would have been elsewhere, just because we were able to put this, and of course the idea is that you get these as close to level as possible so that the water, you take a lot of the energy out of the water because it sheets out, and deep water has power, but the shallow water, it also causes it to drop out a lot of the sediment that's in it. Same idea here. That this was another structure that was put up on the original. So the stream is going here now, but that was the original part of the stream. But this is a good illustration too. So being the next summer, we already have on the hill slopes the aspen regeneration here. This is my barn on Middle Creek, and this little creek is what they call Middle Creek, and it's the one that goes right up towards the tower, so it has quite a big basin. It doesn't look like much when it comes out, and you usually step across it. And this was actually where I thought it was just the worst ever, but several times later, the rock actually came up to the edge of the roof there. So it got that, and I was telling Gib earlier, we had a party for the AmeriCorps kids right before this happened, and that whole area where we had the picnic is just down under rock. So this is an example of where we did both the seeding and the mulching. So you see that this was from the stream channel clearing, and putting the seed down first, and then of course you can see underneath there's still quite a bit of kind of charred material, but that's stabilizing it. Also very important, it's holding the moisture in, because there was, like I said, a lot of heat, because all this burned black and everything, and all the shade is gone. So mulching, is very important in the recovery of the grasses. So very good treatment. You can barely see this, but this is the bridge going out of town on 450, right over here by Smith's place, and so that's the beam of the bridge, and this is the water. And so it was literally 10 inches from the bottom of that bridge. And so one of the big efforts that we did with the AmeriCorps kids, like I mentioned, that was where we started, was to do the channel clearing, and that was protecting the infrastructure and protecting La Vida, because, and we were watching this water, and because those kids were pretty peeved at me, because it's like, what's today? More pickup sticks? And it's like, yeah, pickup sticks. When we get up to where we actually get into the burn scar, then you're going to get to learn how to do some cool things and start seeding and stuff like that. So the first I don't know, probably a month we were down low, but we were taking all of the woody debris up onto, see what the 100-year floodplain is like. And so we'd have to carry it to wherever it was up above that 100-year floodplain. And then most of that, because it was accessible, was masticated with like a drum masticator, because we could get to it. It didn't have to be burned. But we got, probably 2-3 miles up Middle Creek, and so that was a good example of success. And without that, that bridge would have been a goner, very likely a couple of houses too. Another example of just the log structures, the sill walls and that sort of thing, and just the amount of sediment that they can hold. Go ahead, Tony. This was one where it was starting to cut down, and we started, this was with my prison crew, that we just, to keep that water from just shooting through here, just like a little slot canyon that was just going to keep cutting down, you get what they call turbulence, and it's just that. It's the water starts swirling around, so we use these oak brush limbs in it to get that to swirl around, and so the energy wasn't cutting straight down, and then a lot of the sediment was dropping out, and so it was filling this instead of continuing to cut down. So again, it was just what we could do with what was there, and I think that's really important, because there's so much to do, and if you can use the materials on hand, that's just economical and efficient. This is a log erosion barrier. This is a season after, and all that nice grass that's coming back, the slope here coming down, it's catching that, and then, like I was saying, that this log will eventually rot out a lot faster than the ones that are standing. That last 2 years, year and a half, a lot of them have been blowing down. So that's it's been a really good effective one. And now that we got to the point where things have cooled down, also the pH of the soil is getting back to normal. Now we can start thinking about planting trees in these areas where we have this nice little kind of oasis of good soil. Go ahead. Again, this is really good regrowth because of the mulching. This is red clover, and it's actually blossoming. I think this is one of the ones that we use actually as a cover, so that's probably barley or rye. And that's mullein, and it's technically an invasive, but it's not one that really takes. Pretty much mullein only happens where there's been disturbances, and it doesn't become extremely prolific. If the soil and the surface areas are fairly healthy, it's not one that really gets out of hand. Again, another example of kind of stair-stepping the flow down with sill logs, so that you're not like building a wall or something here. You're allowing to catch some and then drop, and then catch some and then drop. Go ahead. Again, this is some of the I'm not sure what this one is. Do you know, Manuel, what this is? It has these little. It almost looks like a mint. The leaf almost looks like a mint. My sister calls it dragon mint, but I have no idea what it actually is. But it was one that came back a lot after the fire. It's got a very hairy stalk. Mm-hmm. So the stalk is hairy, and then it's got these little kind of cone-shaped flowers.
It's not a thistle. It's not a thistle.
It's not a thistle. No, they look really similar to the leaves. Actually, look like a mint.
It's hard.
It wasn't seeded, it was natural,
No, it was
from the
natural.
seed bank.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Go ahead, Tony. So this was one of my efforts with when the trees had their stress crop and dropped all kinds of this is a white fir, and so I dried the cones and then started growing these babies, and it's still I've still got areas that I have protected by snow fence to shield them from the winds and that sort of thing. So these guys still haven't been put out onto the fire yet.
Could that have been a nettle or a mint?
I think it's a mint. I mean,
Yeah,
it's not
that's
a
a
square
square
stem. Yeah,
It's a mint.
So it's some kind of
Yeah, it's a
it
mint.
was some kind of
We
mint.
have them in our list, yeah.
Go ahead, Tony. So this is when we started doing equipment work, because some of these places, this was one where this gulch was coming down, just the force of it was making it come out absolutely perpendicular to the county road, and it was also a place where the county had put the road in. They'd actually forced the creek out of its original channel and into into a slightly elevated area, and this was the only way in or out. Go ahead, Tony. So these are some of the walls that were water drops that every certain amount of grade that you lose, we put these in to preserve the channel and also spread it out. And again, this is a big alluvial fan. There was some stills of this red sandstone. So whenever we could, we used those and to tie into. Go ahead. This was a really weird one. So I was working in town here one day, and it was, I think, May, and this would have been May of 21, I think, and we saw a fire out here right along the foothills, just by the Arminio Andrietta Ranch and where Oakview, the old coal mining town, was. And I'm like, what in the world could that be? And it turned out that coal seam, and it was actually, after doing some more research, it wasn't the actual coal seam, but it was a place where they used to load the coal cars, and they used to sift the coal. So the really fine coal that wasn't sellable would just go into a big pile here, and then of course what was, I think they called it nut coal or stoker coal, the larger coal was what they could sell. So all this like really fine coal and coal dust suddenly caught on fire. And so, and you can see that oaks had actually grown up within it, and they were cut off, they were burned off. And so we went up there, and did you go on that round? Was it I think you and your boys all ended up going up there, and we put a line around it, and then we just kind of monitored it. But we ended up having, and this was right in the middle of the pandemic, because the Bureau of Mining and Reclamation is responsible for these, and so I had a hard time because all of them were not in the office and everything. To finally get them down, and they finally came down and put it to bed. But it was just wild to have this coal burning. Go ahead, Tony. I like seeing structures that are successful. So again, a very good success. The next one, Tony. So this is over on Pass Creek, where I mentioned where this gulch is. If you know where the Weeping Rock is, which is that big hogback that's to the east of Pass Creek Road, and you go up here and it's just almost all, it's always been just bare rock. And so this was where we had one of the really big blowouts that was blowing out the road, Pass Creek Road. So we did work both above it and below it to stabilize it. Go ahead. I think that's another one of, I'm not sure where that is, but I can tell that it's, trying to build a structure to keep this road that's behind us over here. This is probably a gulch up here, and I think that's Raspberry in the back, so it's not Pass Creek, but to preserve the road so people can continue to have access. Go ahead. This is Indian Creek, and this was actually before it was too bad. So we called this the hanging culvert for when I had the AmeriCorps kids. This was our little footpath, and it actually got much worse than this. This was the road, and because again the area along the creek caught all the woody debris, and so it jumped over onto the roadway and just blew the roadway out. And so that chunk of Indian Creek's no longer there. They've actually put the creek over there permanently, and then put the road where the creek was. So it's switcheroo. So go ahead. This is actually one of the flood events. This is actually right at the mouth of Middle Creek Canyon, and so that's the flood gauge. And the problem obviously here was that we had big logs that was enough of a flow that it actually clogged the gauge and forced the creek over to that side. And that's why channel clearing is extremely important. And it was just amazing how big logs could be brought down in our little gulch up there. I cut cut some of the logs to and actually put them in, as sill logs and stuff. And I think it was the same one that we had the big blowout up at Big Branch. It was, I think, July 31st. We came back home and the creek was shooting out power poles. And I'm like, there's no power poles up there. And I looked at them, they were the logs I had cut, but the gravel and everything had completely denuded them, debarked them, taken all of the bark, all the branches off, and we're shooting them out at the bottom of the gulch. So very, very crazy. So go ahead, Tony. And this one again shows, the size of rock. That's about probably 4 or 5 foot rock that this was able to push down. This is right down, this is just about a mile west of town. This is what they call the Clickers Crossing, so that's the railroad up there. We actually had a lot of success there. It was not something we'd done. It was on the Coe Ranch, so the Coe Ranch is what's to the west of this. About a 2-acre, basically, swamp wetlands area. A decade ago, there had been a lot of beavers there. And now it was just full of reeds, and a lot of times when the floods would hit that, it'd just take the steam right out of them. They'd spread out, and it's built up. It caught a lot of sediment. And of course, those reeds and cattails and stuff just kept regenerating and just kind of meeting each successive flood. So, and then towards the Frank Lucas place right down here, there's a lot of willows. So the willows have really done a lot of good. Yeah.
Yeah, we saw that. On a very large scale when the Mississippi was flooding in 1993. And every place where there weren't levees and the Mississippi could go out into the marshes, the adjacent marshes, just took that care of that, just took the steam out of it.
Yeah, and that's the technical term for that is an attenuation zone. So yeah, and that was what was really good for her.
And so the folks that managed that, I think it's Army Corps of Engineers, started to reconnect the Mississippi.
Yeah, I know, because you look at some of those maps of like between like Missouri and Tennessee and places like that. There's like little chunks of Tennessee and Kentucky over here because they cut off the cross or the oxbows and made a straight river, and and so they're taking a lot of the hydrological balance out of it. Go ahead, Tony. So this is when we started, this is the lady that's a fish biologist for our district, and she's turning over a rock and looking for bugs, so we will know that the fish will have something to eat. But even by now you can see that because of the stability and efforts to catch the fine sediment up above, it's looking trouty, as we say in my family, so a good aeration and that sort of thing. Go ahead. Yeah, so this is looking up, starting to see a little bit more stability in the banks. A lot of the hydrology in action was forcing the bigger rocks to the side, and it's one of those things that nature will heal itself, and the trees falling in and that sort of thing. But boy, the first couple of years are just a nightmare, just really hard to deal with. Go ahead. Again, another picture of a storm. This one up between Kruger and Raspberry, of just letting go. Go ahead. This is on our place, and this just shows you this tiny little creek and how much, there's a gravity-fed, fuel tank there. It's probably, 8 feet off the ground, and just how much sediment got placed there. And my old 65 Chevy, my brother-in-law, bless his heart, and praise me, took it from right here and put it back there, and it was just fine. So I was like, why'd you leave? He's like, just never know. And like, yeah, literally three weeks later. I'll go ahead, Tony. So I got this, my mom, being rather shocked and amazed, flabbergasted. But like, I'm standing 6 feet above our old former driveway. Go ahead, Tony. This is one where Idlewild comes out and joins North Middle Creek, and so this is one of my colleagues, and just looking at this massive tree and the root wad of the tree that's just been undercut by the water shear force, as it comes around this corner. And so this was another place where structures were made with logs. because eventually it would have just cut right through this. And so this is Idlewild Creek and North Middle Creek's over here, and it just because this was just slowly deposited topsoil, and it just would have eventually blown right through it. Go ahead. So again, I think this is where the prison crew was starting to do their contour felling up on the hill slopes. This is looking across the valley. This is one of the slopes. Can't see it terribly well. Let's go to the next one, Tony. So there it is. This is kind of zoomed in of the contour felling, and the guy that had been the other prison crew. He'd been in logging and that sort of thing in the Northwest, and he says a lot of times if lands owned by big logging companies get burned, they get their loggers out there basically as soon as the fire's out and start doing this, and soon everything just looks like corduroy. They just get on it really quick and don't give it a chance to erode. And then of course, as soon as it's ready, they send out massive crews of planters to go out and start planting the trees again. But of course, their conifer regrowth is much faster out there than it is here. But I just thought that was a really good idea, you know, to get out there quick. You know, those trees are just going to become a jackstrawed mess, and the animals aren't going to get through them. But like I say, too, if they're on the ground, they're in contact with the ground, and they're able to break down a lot quicker. Go ahead. This is one of the terrible things. This is when we had the big blowdown up at Bear Blue and over on the Upper Orfano, and this was probably a 250-year-old ponderosa that was right at the bottom of our place that had survived the fire, and the wind took it down. Go ahead. So that was really sad to see that, and we'd also had, go ahead, Tony. This is my neighbor's house, the Fishers, and they weren't home, and I had to make the phone call and say, oh, there's a really good cottonwood in your living room now. But fortunately, it was amazing. It did not really do any structural. It broke windows and doors, the glass windows here. But the only real structural damage was just this little piece of flashing. And so it was really close. But again, it was just like these cottonwoods, because they did a lot of mitigation around their place, and that's why it survived the actual fire. But you know, you didn't have all these massive stands of trees to slow the wind down, and of course it was just a huge wind event anyway, so kind of the combination of the two. Go ahead. So this is a lady that's one of the geologists with the Colorado Geologic Survey, and this is where we're looking for the burn lines. And so I think there's one about here, there's one about here, there's one here, and I think one down here. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing what the results of the OSL readings are. Go ahead, Tony. So this is a friend that we hadn't seen for a while. Unfortunately, our frenemies that are the rodents that came back, that like all my little tiny baby trees that as soon as I put them out into my nursery area that was all nice and protected from the wind and everything, the mice came back after the fire first. They were there in massive numbers, and they girded those little trees, a lot of them. And so we were very happy to see these guys. But a lot of the predators took their sweet time, and of course a snake, he'll go over here and he'll slither over here and he'll spend the winter under this rock. And so it took them a long time to get back up there. Go ahead, Terry. So here we see some, this was last summer, so we're seeing a lot better recovery, and we're looking at a slope that did have 100% or almost 100%. There's a couple ponderosas there that were dispersed enough that they didn't get burned, but the majority of these upper hill slopes had the high intensity, had 100% mortality of the trees. So we're seeing a lot of the oak brush especially coming back on these slopes. Same sort of thing. This is a whole lodgepole area. You can see how thick this was. So the lodgepoles, like I say, they are really, so a lot of what we're seeing in the green on these slopes are just those lodgepoles just coming back in mass amounts. Go ahead. This is looking east from my house, and so we were very fortunate because we had mainly ponderosas that were fairly well spaced, and the fire also jumped over our valley. And my theory is, when Sheriff Newman finally, let us, the whole family go back in to see what the damage was. Right at the end of our driveway down here, right near the creek, in the willows, we found an elk that was not a hair singed on her or anything, just dead as a doornail. And so my theory is she may have been killed by smoke inhalation, hot gases, and that sort of thing. But my theory is that when these ridges after were burned so intently, that it may have been sucking all the oxygen out of the body. So that's what I'm thinking. That's how I kind of explain that. But we also had, you know, areas of trees that weren't as thick, that were low, that it just jumped over. And so again, that was where when these started doing their stress crop, I collected seeds. And unfortunately, yeah, they're down low, and so to get the seeds back up, you know, it's going to take some help, or, you know, some of them will obviously go with the wind, right? So this is just another one of demonstrating. This is when we're doing the measurements of those spur lines, and this was I think last December. But it shows you just the amount of centuries of slow accumulation that the floods just blew out. Right? This is one of the ones that I did for SPOP, and this is a crib wall. I did it for SPOP and BLM. So this is the hill that's actually Manuel and Marianne's hill. So this is just opposite them. So just on the opposite side of this is where 160 is, and we're looking straight north from the North Middle Creek Valley and County Road 442. And so this was a really interesting little almost box canyon here, but again, over the centuries, this sandy loam bench, it was an alluvial fan, had built up, and the county road is right here, and it started just blowing out. And so the idea here is that you have this wall is tilted in, it's actually tilted down, so that the water, as it comes down, it'll, like I was saying, the shallow water just doesn't have the energy, so it'll start here, and then it'll be sheeting out as it comes across here. And of course, we put a lot of we put bigger boulders and that sort of stuff in to keep it from scouring. But this was one of those areas where, you know, to slow it down, but then also to catch that fine sediment before it got into the creek. And so we did a number of these again on those ephemeral draws, which you know, may only see a little bit of water in the spring, but then of course, you know, we're far enough away that we shouldn't get blown out, but we might see some big enough surges that this might fill in one surge, but I doubt it, because we have enough regeneration. So this is our creek, and there's creek back cutthroats. Well, one more. So we're really excited about that. So
How big are those?
those are about 8 to 10 inches.
Wow, nice.
So and then this last fall they put in just like 6,000 or 7,000 fever lilies. So they have. I was going to say, so the big ones have food, but hopefully they're really smart and they say, well, those are our kids. Yeah.
Have some cutthroats been planted in South Aveda?
No, I don't know of
No.
that. So,
Okay.
but they wanted to do that kind of because that was just an isolated area to kind of do a test case. But we're thinking about Indian Creek too, getting them back up in Indian Creek. So it was one of those, yeah, good news, bad news. It killed all the rookies, but it made a clean slate for the natives. Right? This is just looking at an area where, again, the ponderosis, the fire came through. Most of the oak brush, you can see these are 6 to 8 foot oaks, but the oaks are regenerating from the roots. But the ponderosis came through pretty good. Right? This is one of the sad effects that the fire had, just because it stressed the trees. And ponderosa can survive with probably 40%. I don't know. Do you know CK Byron? Of its canopy still intact. It can take a lot of the canopy out. But
yeah, it can take a lot of it out, and as long as the buds are good, it can put out new needles
yeah,
from the new buds.
yeah.
Just like when you get some of these wind drying events and all the needles get scorched, but the new buds.
Yeah, so they have somewhere to go from. But unfortunately, this one was stressed enough, and then the mountain pine really did. And that's the telltale signs are sap, and then what they call popcorn, which is kind of a mixture of sap and the sawdust from where they bore in. And so I saw those last year, and they started to turn orange, and I said, oh no, because they survived the fire. Go ahead. Tony, but they did survive the bugs. Just another picture from this last summer of things looking good. This little guy, I saw him weigh almost 9,000 feet. So again, it was one of those that good to see a lot of different ecological niches being filled. This is, I think that's a big ponderosa.
So,
Can't quite tell yet, but I think it is, because it was one of the very first ponderosas that I've actually seen that have ever regenerated since the fire from seed. Go ahead, Tony. This is the New Mexican locust this last year, and a lot of people curse the New Mexico locust, but one of the things is it's been really good about regrowing. The other thing is it's a legume, so it's a nitrogen fixator in the soil. So that's a really good thing. And every now and then we have a really good spring like we did this last spring, and they just, beautiful prolific blossoms, and they make really good fence posts, and they make really good smoking wood, and I'm a fan. Please don't hang me. So some people just can't stand them. But
They are native, right?
they are native. In fact, they're not very common. They're actually considered a somewhat rare tree, but it's not here. In the overall, ecology of North America, they're fairly rare. Go ahead. This is the Corydalis, and this is one of the pioneer species that we saw right after the fire.
Is that the snowberry you said?
No, that's the Corydalis,
Okay.
which is the gray one with the yellow flowers, and I think I've got some snowberry. Keep going, Tony. Keep going. This was a little friend. This is a weasel as an ermine in his winter phase, and this was a couple months ago at the conjunction of North and South Middle. This is a picture of the contour felling, and I think, go ahead, Tony. So there it is. There's the Corydalis on the slope where they did the contour felling. So, and yeah, you can see why they call it snow bush. So this was in December, and it was still that green. And so yeah, if you go into the burn scar up top or that area, you look and see all these little bushes, 18 inches tall with these curly waxy leaves. That's the Corydalis, or yeah, Ceanothus. Yeah.
there's a snowberry,
Yes.
and then
Snow
snow
bush.
bush.
So this is snow bush.
Ceanothus,
Yep,
and that's what you
that's
got there.
So, yep. Go ahead, Tony. So this is one of the contour felt logs, and you can just see all the fine material that is above it that it caught. So, and the other great thing, this being a convict fire crew, they would be really good practice with their directional felling for trees. And they had a very good incentive, because if it wasn't straight across the slope and it was an angle, I had them get either pry bars or log lifters and put it straight. So they got really good, really fast. So go ahead. This is just I think this is probably ryegrass, and it just shows what a good clump grass this is, and this is one of the ones that is in our mix. Go ahead. This is just showing the streams are just starting to show stability, that we're getting enough organics in. This was so sterile because it was just rock and gravel, but we're getting to the point where it's actually supporting root structure of grasses and that sort of thing. And this one actually had watercress, so this is this winter in Middle Creek. So all of this stuff it slows down all those fine sediments, and then of course a lot of those are organic, so it's making its own habitat as it goes. Go ahead. Again, just another picture of the overbanks getting stability from the creek originally was up here, and cut down that far, but it's actually starting to build up and build up these banks. Go ahead. So this is up at right at the top of 442. And this just shows the regrowth of these aspens. They're 12 feet tall, and just this was an area that was actually mechanically logged, and so they took everything, all the dead out of there. It's just amazing how the aspens have come back. This is the oak brush, and so here is really telling, because you can see 10 maybe mature trees that were killed in the fire, and then it's just coming back as a shrub right now, but it will, certain ones will take dominance and they'll become a nice grove of Gamble's oak. This is our aspen stand, and like I said, it suffered badly because these trees here were 12 to 14 foot tall white firs, and there was lots of them. And these, the mature, some of them were probably 50, 60 foot tall aspens. They didn't burn in the fire. It was just so hot from all these little conifers, they just scalded it. They just blew the bark off. And because the fire intensity wasn't so bad, all the clonal root structure, all these little guys, all this is, all the way to here are all little aspens coming back. And then this is just showing a small stand of ponderosas that had the spacing, and then also had this nice meadow here that it survived. But then this is the railroad track up here, and beyond that point, almost 100% mortality just because of both thickness and just the way the fire was traveling. So these got a little bit out of order. So this is the Chattel clearing just west of town with the American crew that we started just right out here at the bridge. A pile that we did, like I say, we had to get them up out of the 100-year floodplain, and so then they could be masticated later on. Same deal here, of just getting them up out of the floodplain. Those Harold Wolberg, his family was at the first ranch going out of town, and we picked it up, and he's like, "Wow, it looks like a park." He's like, "We'll have to have picnics or something down here." So it made a real big difference there. So go ahead, Tony. So this is just right after the fire. These are some of the very first things coming up. Here we have the New Mexico locust. Here we have the Oregon grape, the Mahonia repens, which looks like a little holly. So those are some of the very first things that come up. This is fun. This is a thermograph of the coal bed fire. So right in the middle there, 302 degrees. Wow. So Stephen Ames, some of you might know him. He's one of our firefighters. He grew up in Hawaii. One of the Hawaii native things is that they used to cook pigs in like lava beds, and so they have a special term for it. And he's like, "Yeah, on my way to work, I'll just take some chickens over there wrapped in foil." And I was like, "You're gonna find charcoal when you get back. That's hot in there." And it didn't look that hot when we went up there. It was just like, "Oh yeah," and a lot of it was pretty powdery and hot and everything. Go ahead, Tony. And this is an old mining car and an old mining railroad of right at the site too. So I'm always very fascinated by the mining history of the area. Go ahead. And we're back. That's it. Thank you for bearing with me. And any questions?
I got one.
Yeah, go ahead.
Why didn't they put in a sediment detention basin?
I don't know if it was one of those.
I mean, your log crib wall was a good start.
Yeah, and we proposed that. We proposed that right at the bottom of Idlewild. We proposed that at Sulphur Springs. And in fact, when I think Justin may have been there for that one too. But I don't know if there was landowner pushback, too, of having a big giant, bigger basin and that sort of thing. But I think. Yeah,
because the log crib wall you built right below it should create, and it's not that big a basin, but the theory is after the flooding, it's all full of sediment. The logs rot away and you don't even know that it was there, but you take that channel out of it.
Yeah. Well, that one, there was the one, that was just such a small area. I mean, that channel was like, I could easily step across it pre-fire. But it just blew it out. But that's what I'm saying about getting all these different kind of everything to complement the stars. Doing things way up with seeding and crib walls, and then as you work down, larger structures, and just trying to look at the whole picture, not having one group over here doing this and one group over here doing this, and so that was part of my one of my responsibilities, work on the kind of the collaborative efforts of everybody that was working out there. So. Okay, anybody else?
Thank you.
All right. Oh,
I just
Jen.
wanted to say thank you for your really extraordinary efforts personally with this overview over these last years. It's amazing.
Yeah,
Thank you
I've
so
been,
much.
I've been amazed by all the different elements of it.
Yeah.
It's been really interesting. So, all right, thank you. All right.